ways we wrap or warp our view of the world. You know, there's a scripture that says, as a man thinks in his heart so easy, that is the way he thinks, his actions, or perhaps more importantly, his reactions. So, do we have a warped view of the world? Know the patterns. Familiarize yourself with the 10 distorted thinking patterns. Recognize distorted thought patterns. You need to recognize distorted thought patterns in order to be able to change them. Once you know the patterns, you can start to recognize thought patterns that may not be serving you well. Challenge your own thinking. See if the patterns resonate, especially in situations where your thinking or your feeling is not particularly effective. For example, you might find that you have a habit of jumping to negative conclusions without actual facts. That's important. You might not have actual facts, okay? Or you might find that the negative patterns and emotions get in the way of interpreting your situation. So, challenge the way you're thinking. Just don't accept it as that's just the way I am. I think the key is to use this list to challenge your own thinking in any scenario where your thinking starts to seem particularly negative. It's good to your sanity to check out against the patterns below. So we're going to cover different thinking patterns and check yourself if you see yourself in some of these patterns. Now, I've been doing these patterns in classes for the last 15 years, and I've asked people to check themselves which of these patterns directly affect them. And you'll find that most of them have affected them in one way or another. I know these patterns have affected my life in drastic ways in the past or even today. There's one I call all or nothing thinking. All or nothing thinking. You see things in black and white categories. If your performance falls short of perfection, you see yourself as a total failure. There's a lot of people fall in this category, particularly if they are a person that has a perfectionist mentality. If they can't do it right, they can't do it correctly, then they won't do it at all. That's poor thinking, or distant thinking, or distorted thinking, shall I say. Overgeneralization. Overgeneralization. You see a single negative event as a never-ending pattern of defeat. Overgeneralization. You see a single negative event as a never-ending pattern of defeat. Then there's a mental filter. Mental filter. You pick out a single negative defeat and dwell on it exclusively so that your vision of reality becomes darkened, like the drop of ink that colors the water. It just spreads in the water, and now the water has been contaminated or changed by the ink. What kind of mental filter do you have? Disqualifying the positive. Disqualifying the positive. You dismiss positive experiences by insisting they don't count for some reason or another. In this way, you can maintain a negative belief that is contradicted by your everyday experiences. If this a contradictory experience by your experiences every day, then you must dismiss this in such a way that you don't count it. That makes just good sense to me. Jump into conclusions. You make a negative interpretation even though there are no definitive facts that convincingly support your conclusion. Jump into conclusions. We've all done that. We've all done that. You make a negative interpretation, even though there are no definitive facts that convincingly support your conclusion. And there's mind reading. You arbitrarily conclude that someone is reacting negatively to you, and you don't bother to check it out. In mind reading, you just conclude that someone is reacting negatively to you, and you don't even bother to check it out. Maybe they are, maybe they aren't, but you can't read their minds. And then fortune teller error. You anticipate that things will turn out badly, and you feel convinced that your prediction is an already established fact. Have you done that before? And magnification, or catastrophizing, or minimalization. You exaggerate the importance of things, such as you goofed up or someone else's achievement, such as your goof up or someone else's achievement, or you inappropriately shrink things until they appear tiny in your own desired qualities or the other fellow's imperfection. This is also called binocular trick, or you see in it with distorted thinking. That's what all these are talking about. Emotional reasoning. You assume that your negative emotions necessarily reflect the way things really are. I feel it, therefore it must be true. Let me tell you about your feelings. They have no real validity. Did you know that? I've studied this for many years. Feelings have no volition. Of course, they don't even think. They piggyback the way you think. That's the reason why it's so important to understand all these different lessons that we'll be providing. If you change your life, you have to change the way you think. And we're going to have several lessons dealing just with that particular thing. You can't go by your feelings, folks. They'll deceive you. Okay? Should statements. You try to motivate yourself with shoulds and shouldn'ts, as if you had to be whipped and punished before you could expect to do anything. Musts and oughts are also offenders. The emotional consequences is guilt. When you direct should statements toward others, you feel angry, frustration, and resentment. Should statements. Labeling and mislabeling. Labeling and mislabeling. This is an extreme form of overgeneralization. Instead of describing your error, you attach a negative label to yourself. I'm a loser. Really? When someone else's behavior rubs you the wrong way, you attach a negative label on him. He's really a loser. Mislabeling involves describing, and even with language that is highly colored and emotionally loaded. So when you mislabel, it involves describing an event with language that is highly colored and emotionally loaded. Personalization. You see yourself as a cause of some negative external event, which in fact you are not primarily responsible for. Personalization. You see yourself as the cause of some negative external event, which in fact you are not primarily responsible for to begin with. Our certification training is a sure way to deal with topics that may affect you or affect others. So this is one of several lessons here talking about the way we think. The Bible says again that as a man thinks in his heart, so is he. Another one says, by Solomon, Guard your heart above all things, for out of it flow the issues of life. So what issues of life are flowed out of your heart? Is it negative or is it positive? Is it uplifting and up and building people up, or trying to run them down? Do you see them in a negative light or positive light? Really, this lesson and the ones that will follow, talking about thinking, can literally change your life forever. And you can become the person you desire to be, but you have to change the way you think, because if you're thinking negatively, you'll reap what you sow. That's the principle also. You reap what you sow. You sow negatives, you reap negatives. You sow positives, you reap positive. So what are you sowing? What are you planting? What does your garden look like? Is it a poor garden? Or is it a rich garden? It's all up to you. So this is a lesson I think that will be exciting for you to learn